The pie. James Ponderley was hungry and fancied a pie, but on this occasion his thirst was for a pie of quality. Something to satisfy for a while his craving. He set out on foot, as often he did. His hunger would only develop nicely, and should it fancy him, he wanted to be able to eat the entire thing in a sitting without the least sense of guilt. He waddled over to Clemley Street. He had a vague memory of a baker's. A smell had caught him once before, but he hadn't the time to inspect the window, and it looked far too expensive for regular use. But this time was different. Then, to his surprise, he had made his way down the entire street. Had it perhaps closed? He paused and reflected. A large German shepherd came out from a side alley. James watched it suspiciously as it strained against its leash. It didn't seem at all interested in Ponderley, or following the path of its owner. A scent caught him, subtle at first, light and salty, slowly growing rich and fruity, deepening into dark, greasy multi-tones and aromatic herbs. It was a bakery, all right. He drifted lightly towards the funk. How did he miss it before, lit like a roaring fire, pastry, and pastries and puddings shone out into the street. He only realized his piggy nose was pressed against the window when it began to ache. He stepped back. He pushed the door. A little bell sang out a few sweet notes as it opened. On the counter it sat before him, a disc like a car tire, pastry shining bronze. The top, a beautiful pond of aspic, vegetables, perfect cuts of meat, caught and preserved in mid-flight. To his horror, the pie was taken away and replaced with a man behind the counter. "How can I help?" he said. "I would like to buy that pie," is what James Ponderley meant to say. Instead he blunted out, "I that pie?" The shop attendant replied, "No." "Why not?" said Ponderley. "Well, first of all, I don't think you'd taste nearly as good." "What?" said Ponderley. "And secondly, I apologise, but that pie is not for sale." "I think you misunderstand me as to how much I want that pie, sir," said Ponderley firmly. "I am willing to spend an absurdly large amount of money to this end." The shop attendant was unmoved. A hint of disdain could be perceived across his face. "We do not make those for the general public." "But," said Ponderley. "No," the shop attendant repeated. "That is the end of the matter." Ponderley found himself flushed at this injustice. Here he was, willing to spend whatever ungodly sum of money on a simple act of kindness to his own digestive system, and denied that by this fool, not willing to bend to the capitalistic pressures he was subject to daily. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I must attend to the pastries on the bake," said the attendant. He hurried off into the distance. Ponderley couldn't help but notice the footsteps trailed off for quite a long way. Then he saw it, the object of his desires, sitting squarely on a table just through the door. His desire consumed his entire body. Suddenly he was off, in a feat of athleticism perhaps greater than he had ever expelled in his entire life. He vaulted his entire bulk over the counter, landing in only slightly controlled fall, like a fresh ball of dough. He lunged forth for the pie, grasping it into his arms with the care of a mother, and projecting himself towards the half-door of the counter. A vault was required, but beyond him was such a precious cargo, and his momentum was enough. The small latch exploded as he flew out across the floor and into the street. He didn't know how far he ran. Anything on his putty little legs felt like miles. He had the strange feeling of being pursued, despite how unlikely that the bakery be left unattended. After a while he came across a pub and took a seat outside. The barmaid, seeing this sweaty man and his large pastry, brought out the manager, but the manager understood such things. and seeing the majesty of his prize, brought him a plate, a knife, and a small pint of beer. He cut a slice. The sunlight sparkled through the jelly. As he chewed, tears ran down his face, tears for the loss of what had gone, and tears for the beauty to come. A huge German Shepherd leapt up onto the table. Ponderly screamed. Both legs of his plastic chair smashed, and he listed over backwards along with the pie onto the floor. The pie landed on his chest, and the dog followed. Like a blue whale, the contents of Ponderly's stomach erupted from his mouth. "Johnson!" a woman screamed. "Get down!" "Are you okay?" she said to Ponderly. The woman was trying to help him up, unsuccessfully. He pushed himself to his feet. Ponderly said, I think I've lost my appetite." He glanced at the dog, busily eating the smashed pastry. The woman said, "Good thing too, you've been eating my dog's pie. That's the only way Johnston'll eat his medication." "His what?" said Ponderly. He had regained some of his shattered nerves. "Poor Johnston has awful worms," she said, earnestly. Ponderly released the remainder of his stomach onto the pavement. Johnston eyed it up. He continued with his main course, and reserved to save it for pudding. Ponderly made his way home, feeling, smelling, and looking worse for his little adventure. He decided this was the last time he'd think of his stomach. As he cornered a street, he noticed a small specialty cake store, and a longing ache begin in his stomach.